Welcome back everyone to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to be talking about Collei, the last character in the Sumeru arc in our character archive. Obviously, as you can see here, we've made it all the way down here. But before we get into Collei, like normal, I just want to let everybody know, in about 2 weeks when the banners change again, we'll be going through the new character Kanish, but also with the 5 stars as we're doing that kind of similarly now. The 5 stars on the banners, I'll be making build guides for them as well, as long as I haven't done a build guide recently or kind of in the more recent bias with that, which I probably won't be redoing a lot of build guides for a little while, just because most of the time, most of these characters aren't going to change. Now, looking at these types of characters, though, obviously new characters are going to get their reruns, but yeah, that's basically it. So besides that, let's go ahead and talk about Collei. Now, Collei's a really good character, especially for people that are trying out to start Dendro on their account pretty new, and they kind of don't have too much going on. Obviously, besides that, she's really good on application, and it allows your Dendro main character as well to be performed with this team or, throw in somewhere else if you once again are starting out with Dendro. Now, that's not necessarily to say that she's absolutely useless when it comes to when you have Nahida and all these other characters like Baiju and Yao Yao and Dendro main character build. It's just that Collei kind of falls off a little on the spectrum on that idea, but when you actually are thinking about things like the Imaginarium Theatre, it's not bad to have these extra characters that aren't maybe necessarily meta, just to be thrown in for the Imaginarium Theatre whenever Dendro is necessary for that Imaginarium Theatre. When you need a lot of Dendro characters, it's not necessarily bad to have these characters at least semi-built with okay weapons and some good artifacts just already thrown on them, with the talents at least leveled a little bit, because all these characters really care about is a lot of energy usually, maybe some crit, and just a stat that they kind of go into. And so while we're looking at that, let's go ahead and talk about talent level priority. The first thing you're going to want to focus on is going to be your skill and your burst. Really, with Collei, like I talked about before, you only really care about energy and making sure you're getting your burst back, but also her entire kit's just based on making sure that she can get a lot of energy for the team while doing a lot of, or maybe just Dendro application mainly, but also mainly just getting out some good damage on the side. Now, like before and like with the last video, as well as any support character, I always like to make sure that my support characters can at least do some good damage, just to maybe just help out the team as well, even if they are mainly only focused on application. So with leveling into your skill and your burst, I think you can bring those both to level 8 if you can get the character to level 80, and even a little bit higher than that. I think sitting at level 8 for Collei is going to be pretty good, and then you can focus on someone else. Don't really level into the normal attack at all, because it's practically useless most of the time. So more or less, looking at the actual character's talent info for the skills and the bursts. Looking at the skill, she will throw out a floral ring that deals 1 instance of Dendro damage to targets it comes into contact with. The floral ring will return after a set amount of time and dealing Dendro damage once again. So basically, it's basically like a Dendro boomerang. So if once again you throw out, it does 1 hit, and then once it comes back, if it hits the enemy again, it'll do another instance. So it can get a maximum of 2 hits as well whenever you get that done. So that is nice to know at least a little bit that you can get some extra, once again, application. Possibly hitting things multiple times creates more particles, as well as making sure that you're getting a lot of that application on field and possibly more damage. So looking a little bit beyond the skill, once again, it's only really based on personal damage. It's the only reason why you level it. Looking at the burst now, it states that she throws her doll out, causing an explosion that deals AoE Dendro damage, creating the Collei Ambar zone. Probably saying that wrong, but oh well. Basically, at this point in time, that little doll will bounce around inside the zone, dealing AoE Dendro damage. Now you can see mainly where you're focusing a lot on constant application. As you throw this field out, as well as your skill, it's allowing constant application on field for either more characters to do more bloom reactions, just Dendro related reactions like spread, aggravate, whatever. It's allowing a lot of these ideas to go into making sure your characters can get to the next step of a Dendro application idea. So maybe it's allowing bloom for hyper blooms, maybe it's allowing bloom for just bloom or burgeon. Maybe it's allowing the quicken to hit so that when your Dendro character comes on field, they can hit spread. Or maybe it's the other way and you're just applying it so that an electro character can come on field and hit aggravate. That's basically the entire idea here, is just constant application while also allowing a little bit of good damage while she's on field with this at least as well. Well, she's off field, but honestly as well, the burst is on field. So looking at her passive talents a little bit beyond this, once again, those skills are really only for damage. So looking at the first passive talent, it states that if one of your party members has triggered basically any type of Dendro related reaction, before the floral ring returns, which is that ring that she throws out in her skill that I showed you, it will grant the character the sprout effect upon return, which will continuously deal Dendro damage equivalent to 40% of Collei's attack to nearby opponents for 3 seconds. But if I have Floral Ring, obviously, and I do have Sacrificial on here, which was constantly allow me to reset my skill cooldown, which allows me to throw out the ring twice, then it's going to happen only for that second time. It doesn't allow it to just happen multiple times for the character. So that's the major thing that you want to keep in mind with her. It's not really anything crazy. Don't really worry too much about it. It's just more or less that's what's going to happen. Looking at the second passive talent, though, when a character within the zone created by the burst triggers any Dendro-related reaction, the zone's duration will be increased by 1 second, and a single burst that you use can be extended this way up to 3 seconds. If we look at the burst rotation or the duration of it, it is a 6-second duration. And if you're constantly basically triggering Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Quicken, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's hitting a Dendro-related reaction, which the whole point of Dendro is constantly creating reactions, so you're probably very easily going to get the 3-second increased time here. So stay inside that zone, make sure that you're triggering constant reactions, which is very easy to do, and you'll make sure that that extra Dendro application from her burst is going from 6 seconds all the way up to 9 seconds. It happens very easily to the point where you don't even have to think about it. It's just going to happen for you. Now, looking a little bit further into weapons on what you should be using on your Collei. Now, in my personal opinion, I'm not really too much of a fan of any of the 5 stars. Elegy for the End is a pretty good weapon if we're thinking of any of them, just because it can increase elemental mastery and attack for all nearby party members, which could be very nice for them, but I really don't feel like Elegy for the End, if you have this on Collei, it really should be put on another character if you can really find them, or just pull Venti at that point and put it on him. But I do think that it is a good weapon, so if you have an extra one, just because it's got 55.1% energy recharge at level 90. At level 90, it also has a 608 base attack, which is more than any other 4 stars, obviously. So I just think that obviously it's a very good weapon, but if you have another character you could put this on, I really don't feel like it's super extremely necessary to put it on her. But besides that, I think the other weapons I would really choose are really mainly only going to be characters or weapons, specifically like Sacrificial Bow and Favonius Warbow. Now, the reason I say that is because I don't even care about the extra energy particles that can be created from Favonius. The reason why I like Sacrificial is just because it allows you to consistently use your skill. And most characters use the constant Favonius Warbow like 50,000 times anyways, so I really do like the ability to use your skill more consistently for more application. I do like the extra damage hits that she can get out of her skill, whereas other characters, for instance like Diona, there's no need to be consistently using your shield over and over again, unless you're fighting one of those Natlin new shield, or the new bosses in Natlin and the local legends, which maybe you do need, 40,000 shields to just constantly be broken and then put back on, and that might be why you want to use Sacrificial on a character like Diona. But most of the time, Sacrificial is probably just going to be put on Collei. Most other characters aren't going to use it, so I do think that it allows Sacrificial to actually have a pretty good use on your account for some of the characters on the team, so it does allow this a little bit more for her. It does have less energy recharge, yes, but honestly, for a pretty good built Collei, all you really need is like 160 to maybe 180 energy recharge, because her burst is only a 60 cost, and with how much she's hitting with her skills as well as her burst, she's creating constant reactions with other characters as well. The entire party should be getting some pretty good particle creation, so at the end of the day, she's not really going to be hurting too much, in my personal opinion, for energy, so I don't really feel like Favonius is really worth it anyways. But that being said, I do think that in most of the times, you could be using this if you're really low on energy recharge. You could be going for Favonius Warbow. But I do think that Sacrificial is just better in my personal opinion anyways as well. Also, it does have a higher base attack, which is just another reason to just go after Sacrificial. More damage. Yes, it's less energy, but I really don't feel like you're going to have too much of a problem with that, because the artifacts that we're now switching to, it's kind of the only thing you're worrying about. When we're looking at 4-piece set bonuses, though, on the sets that you should be using for Collei, the first one is going to be the 4-piece Deepwood set. The reason why is because most of the other characters you're going to be running in this team might not have it. Now, I know the characters like Nahida are going to be running this set. Characters like Baiju could even be running this set as well. So if there's another character in your party, for instance like this, these effects can't stack. The Dendro resistance that you're getting from using the skill or burst is not going to stack with someone who also has this set on, which means that Collei is basically having a useless 4-piece set here. But I use her on other teams that don't have Baiju in it, so that's why I have her on this set. But if you're, let's say this is your only team, catching Kazuha, Collei, and Baiju, or Yao Yao or something, then I can understand that you might want to switch over to a different set that's going to look a little bit differently. And the reason why I say a different set is because the other set that I think if you really want to, once again, if you have another character on the team that's running Deepwood, whether that's Nahida, Yao Yao, any of the other characters I kind of stated, you could use a 4-piece noblesse. And the reason is because the 2-piece is increasing the elemental burst, which is going to be great because it's personal damage. A lot of the other characters don't really care that use noblesse too much, are going to really care about the 2-piece part of the noblesse. It's really kind of just there to, I guess, help out, but it's not really too much of a help. But with Collei, who likes to do damage as well as application, this is actually pretty useful for her. For the 4-piece, it increases attack when you use a burst for 12 seconds, so I do think this is pretty useful. Also, since this effect can't stack, using Collei in teams that don't have Bennett or Diona, which are most of the Dendro teams, then you can actually allow yourself to use Noblesse on this set. So I do think that Collei could use that set as well. I do think they are pretty high contenders for each other, so it kind of just depends on whether or not you can kind of get that going through and whatever. Now, I know people as well have even talked about a 4-piece tenacity, but the reason I don't like a 4-piece tenacity is because the triggering just isn't as high. I also know that people talk about a 4-piece instructor. That could be another set people use. I know that that's a good set that, for the 4-piece, but at that point, I'd rather just stick with extra sets for her. At the end of the day, if you're really running anything, if I guess, a 4-piece gilded, it could also be useful as well. But as you can see, the majority of people are going to be running a 4-piece Deepwood, not any of these other combinations. This is really just for burst damage anyways, and the 4-piece gilded is more personal damage, which once again is nice, but I do feel like if she can help the other characters in the teams and help being a better support, I think that's going to be better overall to buff your DPS rather than trying to buff her personally. If she gets to buff herself personally over time, that's great, but I really don't feel like it's extremely necessary to do so anyways. And obviously that's just another reason why something that's a little bit more balanced, if you will, like Noblesse, that can kind of just help anybody who bases off attack, might be more useful than the specific 4-piece Deepwood set. Now, looking in terms of main stats, though, the major sands you're going to go for is going to be attack percent for the main stat. Your goblet, you're going to go for Dendro damage bonus, and your circlet, go for crit rate. You could also go for attack percent if you really want to. I do think that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter too much one way or the other. It's just the difference between critting or having a higher attack. I do understand if people want to go for attack percent as the main stat because you can just get more damage, and a lot of the things she does, the extra damage bits that she can do, are only based off of, just her attack percent. So I will understand, once again, if you guys are like, well, I'd rather just go for an attack percent circlet, that can work as well. But I do feel like the Dendro damage bonus goblet actually does put in some pretty good work for her, so I do like that anyways. But overall, I'd rather just chose for a nice, a little bit higher of a crit rate, just to make sure she's critting, and then obviously, once again, focusing on ER, as well as mainly focusing over into attack where I can. So at the end of the day, I do actually like running this a little bit better, the attack percent sands, the Dendro damage bonus goblet, and the crit rate circlet. Now, in terms of substats for everything, you're going to go for attack percent and ER for what you're mainly looking for. EM and all these other things don't really matter too much, but looking for a high amount of ER to make sure, I think, is probably going to be more worth it than attack percent, just because you're not running ER anywhere else, especially if you're running something like Sacrificial and you're not running Favonius Warbow. It's going to make more sense to run something a little bit different than that, and that's why running into, she already ascends into attack, so that's kind of the major idea here when she's kind of running everything, is because she ascends into attack, you're getting attack everywhere else in her entire kit, and so if you have a lower ER in terms of her weapon with Sacrificial instead of Favonius, that's where you're going to want to focus only into the energy recharge in your actual stats for substats of the character as well. Once again, I think that's the major reason of where you're going to be going and looking for your Collei. Now, looking a little bit farther beyond everything else, we're going to look lastly at Constellations. Now, constellations are a little bit interesting because obviously, with Collei being a pretty good character, I do think she has some pretty good constellations. I really do like her first constellation when in the party and not on the field. Collei's energy recharge is increased by 20%. That puts me over the 180 energy recharge, allows her to just make sure, even when she's off field, even though those particles are helping the on field character, she can actually still create particles when she's off field, allowing with her burst constant particle creation as well, based on what she can do even when she's off field. So I do like that a lot. It creates more particles for your DPS as well as, once again, all the characters, because their energy does go up a very little bit when the main character grabs particles anyways. The C2 states that the passive talent Floral Sidewinder, which we looked at, which is the first passive talent, is going to get changed. So here it's basically just saying when you throw out your skill, if it does any type of reaction, then when it returns, once again, that little ring of damage is going to be hitting for 3 seconds when it comes back to Collei. Now, the C2 now states that it basically stays the same. If you throw it out, it does 40% of Collei's attack as Dendro damage to nearby opponents. Upon return, it's going to do that little ring. But the difference here is that from the moment of using Floral Brush to the moment when this instance of Sprout effect ends, if any of your party members trigger any type of reaction, the Sprout effect will be extended by 3 seconds. And you can only get the Sprout effect this way one time, basically per one usage of the skill, and then obviously will be reset if used consistently over and over again. Now, the entire idea behind this is basically based off of what you get from the skill. The Sprout effect will grant the character the Sprout effect, which will continuously deal Dendro damage equivalent to 40% of Collei's attack to nearby opponents, which is once again that ring. So it's allowing that extension to be a little bit longer through this constellation. So it allows it to go on for an extra 3 seconds. So instead of 3 seconds here, it's now going on for 6 seconds, which just basically allows for more application and more damage. At the end of the day, it goes from a 3-second duration of extra little hits to 6 seconds. Now, looking at the C3, it states that it increases the level of the skill by 3, and the C5 increases the level of the burst by 3. Looking at the C4, I actually do like this one as well, because for most of the Dendro characters, Elemental Mastery is going to be very necessary for the characters, so for someone who can help out a little bit more with Elemental Mastery, it does make sense. This constellation states that using the burst will increase all nearby characters' Elemental Mastery by 60 for 12%, not including Collei herself, which is fine because she doesn't really care too much about the Elemental Mastery anyways, and so helping other characters get more Elemental Mastery, as I've already stated before, is very, very good. So it's just something else. It's, once again, something that just kind of triggers. You don't really have to think about it at all. Now, looking at the Constellation 6, it states that when the skill, or basically that ring in the skill, hits, it will create another miniature doll that will deal 200% of Collei's attack as Dendro damage. And each Floral Brush or the skill can only create one such miniature doll. So it allows a smaller doll to do a big 200% damage hit of Collei's attack as Dendro damage. Once again, another reason why going into attack is kind of a little bit more desired rather than going into crit. But since I don't have the C6, I've kind of gone away from looking at that crit, going away from the attack percent and going more into crit, just for my own personal reasons. I don't really have any other reason besides that. So that's kind of the idea that I would run with her. Now, I think overall with these constellations, you don't need the C4 or the C6 to have a really, really good Collei here. I really do feel like even at C0, she's going to be fine. I do think, though, at the end of the day, that C1 is very nice if I had to choose really between any of them. And the extra application from the C2 is nice, but once again, I really do feel like the C1 pulls a lot of weight for what you can kind of get away with in terms of energy recharge for the character. Now, in terms of teams when looking at Collei, once again, it's just very built on a bunch of different teams. As we've talked about with some other supports, you really just put her on any team that's just going to want to focus on constant Dendro reactions, whether that's an Aggravate team that you can see here, whether it's a Bloom team with Nilou and Nahida and Collei and Yao Yao, just constant application, whether that's a Tighnari team, whether that's a Hyper Bloom team with Kuki, whether that's a Hyper Bloom team with Sino, or an Aggravate team with Sino, or a Spread team with Alhaitham, or any type of team that's just constantly trying to make sure that they're hitting Dendro reactions, Collei's going to fit there. So I think overall, when looking at this party setup in teams, it's just, she's kind of basically the first character that you're going to use if you don't have a lot of Dendro characters. She's the one that you're going to use most of the time to just basically get that started, probably pairing her with Dendro main character to make sure they're doing some good amount of damage together where they can. Once again, I really don't feel like this team section really needs to be long, because if you have a Dendro related reaction team, Collei can find a spot on there. Now, do I think she's better than Nahida? Obviously, no. Dendro main character, I personally like Collei actually a little bit more than Dendro main character. I'd rather use Collei in the slot, but I do know that Dendro main character actually has some very good usages as well. I do just like how Collei works a little bit better, but I do think overall, if you're going to be, once again, I don't think Collei is going to be meta breaking or anything like that for your Dendro teams, but if you do have higher constellations as well, getting to that C4, that allows more elemental mastery for your teammates, which is always good. But if you are looking overall at the team, I do think Collei is just a great starter for a lot of Dendro accounts, or accounts without a lot of Dendro on them. It allows a little bit more to start kind of getting into the fun reactions that you can do. Well, that's everything I've got talking about Collei. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Let me know how you guys build your Colleis, if it's similar, if it's different, if you guys think that she should be put on different things. For instance, I know that looking at Noblesse and Deepwood are the major 4-piece artifact sets. Let me know if you guys think that something else should be better. For instance, do you think I maybe undersold the 4-piece instructor a little bit on it? Do you guys think that maybe she should be put on a different weapon? Overall, let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Once again, thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.